There was darkness, no sound, no light, only cold air filled with the scent of loneliness. Was this death or something else? Ned Stark couldn't tell. Suddenly, a burning pain shot through his chest, like someone had stuffed hot coals inside. He couldn't breathe, yet something inside him kept trying to. The blackness before his eyes began to stir, and in that dim flicker, he saw her, a woman, whispering words in a language he didn't understand. Her hands glowed with fire, yet they did not burn. "Accept my prayer, R'hllora," she said softly. "Take this death and return him to us. Only one true warden remains for the North." Ned gasped, his eyes flying open as if ripped back from a dreamless sleep. A loud, ragged breath escaped him, more like a scream than air. His chest heaved as if life had just been poured back into a dead man. He felt the stone beneath him, wet, ancient. Around him was nothing but darkness and dust. He was in a crypt facing the tomb of his father, and next to him stood the same woman in red Melisandre. "I'm alive." His voice was heavy, hoarse, unfamiliar even to his own ears. "You've been brought back," Melisandre said calmly, watching him with unreadable eyes. "The Lord of Light has a purpose for you, and you are needed for that purpose." Ned tried to sit up, but his limbs felt weak, like they hadn't moved in years. Dried blood clung to his skin, and he could still feel the ghost of the sword that took his head. He wasn't the same man who had once walked into King's Landing, proud and just. Something inside him had shifted. His soul felt scarred, as though pieces were missing. "How long has it been?" he asked slowly, as memory began to crash back like waves in a storm. His betrayal, the dungeon, Sansa's screams, and the sharp bite of ice, his own greatsword, as it severed his neck. Too long for some, not long enough for others. Melisandre said, "You were betrayed. You died with honor. But honor alone doesn't win wars. Westeros is changing, and the dead are rising in the North." Ned's brow furrowed. "Robb, my family, where are they?" Melisandre lowered her gaze. "Your son rides against the Lannisters. The North calls him king. But he is young, and the game is cruel." Ned clenched his fists weakly. A mix of grief and rage boiled inside him. He had trusted too much, believed in justice that didn't exist. He had died because he thought truth alone could save lives. Now, he had returned to a world that had moved on without him, to a family still caught in the claws of war. "I must go to them," he said, trying to rise again, but failing. "You are not the man you were," she replied. "Each time one returns from death, they lose something, a piece of themselves. Are you prepared for what that means?" Ned's eyes were distant now. In his heart, the old codes still lived, but something darker had taken root too. He wasn't sure if it was vengeance, or purpose, or just emptiness. But one thing was clear. He was not done yet. He wasn't resurrected to sit in shadows. He had a war to finish. Ned Stark stood at the edge of Winterfell's crypt entrance, cloaked in shadows, his breath visible in the cold night. The snow had returned, softly covering the paths like a shroud. Melisandre stood behind him, her red cloak glowing like a flame against the grey. He stared at the old stone walls, the same ones he'd left behind when he rode south. It was no longer his home, at least, not the way he remembered it. The world had changed. He had changed. The pain of resurrection lingered in his bones. He felt colder than ever, as if the fire that brought him back had also burned away parts of his soul. Memories came in flashes: his daughters in King's Landing, the weight of betrayal, the sound of his own blood hitting the ground. "You must not let them see you yet," Melisandre said quietly. "Let me send word to your son first." "No," Ned said, his voice rough but firm. "I need to see Robb. He needs to know that his father lives. He's not the boy you left behind. He's a king now, with burdens, losses." She paused. "He may not see your return as a blessing." Ned's eyes narrowed. "He's my son," Melisandre gave him a long look. "Then prepare yourself, for the truth may cut deeper than the sword that killed you." They rode under the cover of night through narrow, hidden trails that only a handful of men from the north still remembered. News travelled faster than horses in Westeros, but the sight of a cloaked man on a black horse didn't raise suspicion in the war-torn land. By the time they reached Robb's encampment near the Trident, the war had already left its scars. Tents were half collapsed, the smell of death hung thick in the air, and the wounded cried in silence. Ned dismounted, his legs trembling not from fear, but from the weight of what he was about to do. A soldier approached, eyeing him with suspicion. "I need to see the king in the north," Ned said. "Who are you, too?" The soldier stopped mid-sentence, as Melisandre pulled back her hood. "Tell him a man who knows the cost of honor has returned." Minutes later, they stood outside Robb's command tent. Inside, voices were raised, strategies debated, tempers frayed. The young wolf's war was bleeding him dry. Ned stepped in slowly. Robb turned, irritated. "I told you." He stopped cold. His eyes locked on the man before him, pale, scarred, older somehow, but unmistakable. "Father." For a moment, the room went silent. Even the flickering torches seemed to hold their breath. "I failed you," Ned said softly, "but I've returned." Robb's face twisted not with joy, but confusion, fear, even anger. This is impossible." Melisandre stepped forward. "The Lord of Light brought him back. His purpose is not finished." "I watched your head fall," Robb said, shaking. "How can you stand here?" "Magic," Ned replied bitterly. "Faith I never believed in. But now it's the only reason I'm breathing." Robb didn't move, his jaw clenched, his hands trembling. "You left us, and we bled for your mistakes," he whispered. "You trusted the wrong people. You died for your honor, and we paid the price." "I know," Ned lowered his head, "and I'll carry that until my second death." The silence stretched. Finally, Robb turned away, his voice cold. "We don't need myths. We need armies." Ned's heart sank. He had imagined this moment so many times, and in none of them did his son look at him like a stranger. "You came back," Robb said finally, without turning. "But you came back too late." Outside, snow began to fall heavier, as if even the sky mourned. The snow thickened by morning, muffling the chaos of the war camp. Ned Stark stood alone at the edge of the tents, watching wounded men being carried past, their moans a haunting echo in the cold air. His presence in the camp was now a secret held by only a few trusted bannermen of House Stark, and a reluctant son who didn't know what to make of a dead father walking again. Robb hadn't spoken to him again since last night. The reunion had left more cracks than comfort. Ned couldn't blame him. He had failed as a father, not just in death, but long before in trusting men like Littlefinger, in thinking the crown had rules. The truth was, he had been naive, and now his family bore the scars. Melisandre approached silently, her red robes brushing against the fresh snow. "You were expecting forgiveness." Ned shook his head. "No, but I hoped for understanding. He does not know the weight of resurrection. He still believes the living can judge the dead." Her voice was calm, but there was a strange sadness beneath it. "I still bleed. I still remember." "That makes me the living, doesn't it?" he asked bitterly. "You may have returned, but you were not whole. You left something behind. Or something was taken from you. That is the cost. It always is." Ned turned away, and yet I have to keep walking. Later that evening, Robb summoned him not to talk as father and son, but as two leaders. The war council was gathered. Great John Umber, Roose Bolton, Mage, Mormont, and a handful of other northern lords eyed Ned with a mixture of awe and unease. None spoke of how he had returned, but the tension was thick enough to choke on. "If Lord Stark walks again," Bolton said, eyes sharp like knives, "then perhaps the gods have truly cursed us." "Watch your tongue," growled Umber. "That's Eddard Stark, no matter what death claims." Robb stood at the head of the table, stoic. "He's here. Whether by miracle or madness, he's here. The question is, what do we do with him?" Ned stepped forward. "You treat me like a ghost, but I am still the warden of the North. I came back not for your crown, Robb, but to stop what's coming." "What do you think is coming?" Robb asked, eyes narrowed. "Not just the Lannisters, not just the Freys. Death itself marches from beyond the wall. I saw it, in flashes. In the dark I passed through, I felt the cold. The true war is not for thrones, it's for the survival of all living men." A silence spread across the tent. "You expect us to abandon the fight here for stories from a crypt?" Bolton sneered. Ned slammed his fist on the table. "I died because I underestimated how dirty men can be. I won't make that mistake again. You're fighting men with gold, but the things coming from the North wear no crowns. They care for no names." "Even if that's true," Robb said cautiously, "we can't just turn our backs on the South. We've come too far. Too many have died." "Then you'll win a kingdom made of corpses," Ned said quietly. The words hung heavy. Robb looked away, his jaw clenched. He didn't want to believe it. He wanted his war to mean something. But part of him knew his father wasn't lying. After the meeting, Robb found Ned outside, sharpening a sword in the cold. "You really saw them?" he asked. "Yes, not clearly, but I felt them. Their hatred, their hunger, and the wall. It won't hold forever." Robb nodded slowly. "Then what do we do, father?" Ned looked up at him. There was no smile, no warmth, just resolve. "We gather what we can. We go home, and we prepare Winterfell for war, not against kings, but against death itself." The wind howled like a wolf across the barren fields as the Northman marched home. Ned rode beside Robb, cloaked in furs, and silence. The path to Winterfell was soaked in blood-broken banners fluttering in the snow, the remains of burned villages like scars across the land. Ned had seen many wars in his life, but this march felt heavier than all of them. He wasn't returning as Lord Stark of Winterfell. He was returning as something else, something colder. At night, Ned rarely slept. When he closed his eyes, he saw fire. Not warmth, but divine fire. Melisandre's prayers, the flaming sword of Beric Dondarrion, and beyond that, blue eyes in the dark. Creatures of ice with no mercy, no fear. The more time passed, the more pieces of his old self seemed to melt away. He spoke less, laughed never. Even his daughters' faces felt like fading sketches in his mind. Robb noticed it. "You don't speak of Sansa or Arya." I don't know where they are, Ned said, and it hurts more than I care to admit. She's still in King's Landing, a prisoner. They treat her like a hostage, or worse. Ned clenched the reins. They used my daughters to break me. I won't forget that. Robb hesitated. And what of Catelyn? Ned's voice lowered. She was my heart once, but she won't understand what I've become. Melisandre, riding behind them, watched quietly. Men who return from death are not given back what they lost, only what they still owe. When the gates of Winterfell finally rose into view, there was no joy. The keep was half burned, the stones blackened from where Theon's betrayal had left its mark. Smoke curled from the chimneys, but it was the smoke of survival, not comfort. Winterfell was no longer a proud castle. It was a wounded beast limping. Through the cold, the soldiers who remained blinked in disbelief as Ned Stark rode through the gates. Some knelt. Others stared in horror, whispering prayers under their breath. Rumors of his return had already reached the north, twisted by fear into tales of wights and walking corpses. Inside the hall, Catelyn Stark stood still as stone when she saw him. Her hand went to her mouth, eyes wide with shock. "No," she whispered. "No, this can't be. It's me, Cat," Ned said gently, but his voice was hollow, not warm, not alive in the way she remembered. She took a step back. You're not the same, I know." Tears filled her eyes. "Why did you come back?" "Because I had to." She reached for him, but when her fingers touched his skin, she flinched. He was colder than snow. She turned away, shaking, her body trembling with grief and confusion. "This isn't natural. You shouldn't be here." And for the first time since his resurrection, Ned felt a stab of pain, not in his chest, but somewhere deeper, a place that hadn't died yet. That night, Ned stood alone in the godswood beneath the weirwood tree. The red leaves drifted down like old blood, settling on his shoulders. He knelt, but couldn't find the words to pray. The old gods had watched him die. What did they expect from him now? Footsteps approached. It was Maester Luwin's apprentice, an older boy now grey in the beard, but still respectful. "My lord, if I may." "The men are uneasy." "They should be," Ned said quietly. "They've forgotten what true winter means, but they speak of you not as a man. They say you were brought back by fire, that your soul belongs to the Red God now." Ned didn't look at him. "My soul belongs to no god. Not anymore." The boy nodded slowly, then hesitated before leaving. "There's a cold coming, my lord. Not just in the wind, in the bones." Ned closed his eyes. "Then it's time we prepare Winterfell to face it, not with songs or banners, with fire, with steel." Behind him, the branches creaked, and the face on the weirwood tree seemed to frown. Even the old gods, it seemed, didn't know what to make of the dead who refused to stay buried. Winterfell had never felt so quiet. The halls were filled with people. Again blacksmiths reforging blades, soldiers training in the yard, ravens flying to and from the rookery with urgent messages. But beneath all the motion, there was a silence that gripped the stone. A silence that came from Ned Stark himself. Wherever he walked, conversations died. People lowered their voices, bowed quickly, and stepped aside. He didn't blame them. He had seen his own death. He wore it like a second skin now. One morning, as the frost clung to the windows, he stood at the edge of the training yard. Boys barely old enough to hold swords were swinging wooden blades with shaking arms. Gage, the old weapons master, looked to Ned, unsure if he should call out or pretend not to see him. "Teach them how to burn the dead," Ned said flatly. Gage blinked. "Burn them. When the time comes, if a man falls and rises again with blue eyes, you don't bury him. You light the fire. No mercy." "Aye, my lord," Gage said, unsettled. Ned turned away. He could feel how fragile everything was. Every brick, every soldier, every moment of quiet. It was the calm before something monstrous. He didn't know when the wall would fall, but he could feel it coming. Not through visions or magic, but through instincts. Something in his blood screamed of an ending. Later that day, Robb found him in the armory, inspecting swords that had been reforged from scrap steel. "You're building a wall here," Robb said, "like we're already defeated." "I'm building what we'll need when the real fight begins." Ned replied without looking up, "You still speak like a man in the grave." Ned paused, then looked at him. "That's because part of me still is." Robb didn't flinch. "You think I haven't died too? I watched men burn for me. I buried my bannermen. I sent Theon home in peace, and he stabbed us in the back. I lost my brothers, Bran, Rickon, and now you stand here, cold as the snow, and expect me to forget all of that because you say the dead are coming." Ned stepped forward. "No, I expect you to remember every moment of it, and understand that even all that grief is nothing compared to what's beyond the wall." They stared at each other. Robb's eyes burned with youth and anger. Ned's held none of that. Just truth. That night, Melisandre climbed the tower alone to where Ned watched the north from the battlements. Below them, Winterfell looked like a graveyard of torches' fires glowing in stillness. "They fear you," she said softly. "They should. You're changing. Slower than Beric did, but still, your face grows harder. Your voice more distant. Do you feel it?" Ned was quiet for a long time. "Yes, but I don't know what I'm becoming. Something in between," she whispered. "Not quite man, not quite ghost." "Then why bring me back?" he asked. She stepped closer. "Because you're the only man the North will still follow. And when the long night falls, the people won't need lords. They'll need fire. They'll need something colder than the dead." He looked at her, his eyes hollow but burning at the edges. "If you made me a weapon, then point me where I must go." She placed a hand on his chest. "Soon, but first, the truth must reach the wall." 2 days later, a raven left Winterfell, carrying Ned's message for the night's watch. "The dead walk. I have seen them. I have walked through fire and come back. Winter is not coming. It is already here." The raven flew north, and so did death. The wind howled louder, now no longer just winter's breath, but something deeper, older. It carried a scent of rot and ice, and those who had lived long enough in the north could feel it in their bones. Ravens no longer returned from the wall. The flames in the weirwood tree burned strangely at night. Even the direwolves howled differently. Ned stood atop Winterfell's highest tower, cloaked in black furs, watching the horizon with a gaze colder than the frost. His face had thinned further. What little softness had survived in him was gone now. Only the mission remained, to prepare the North for the coming darkness inside the hall. Robb and the remaining lords sat in tense council. News had reached them. The wall had fallen. The Night's Watch was scattered. Eastwatch by the sea gone. The dead were moving south. "They'll reach us in weeks," said Mage Mormont, slamming her fist on the table. "We need to call every house, every able man, the Umbers, the Karstarks, even the wildlings, if it comes to it. We send riders now, Robb said. Tell them we do not fight for thrones anymore. We fight for life. The men murmured in agreement, but Roose Bolton's voice cut through them all. And what of your father? You speak of life, yet you follow a man who walks beyond death. How do we know he isn't one of them? Robb rose, fury darkening his eyes. He is Eddard Stark, my father, my blood. He is not the man who raised you. No, Ned's voice boomed from the doorway, silencing the room. I'm not. I turned toward him. The flickering fire in the hall made his shadow stretch long and grim. I died with honor, he said, stepping forward, but I came back with purpose. I do not ask for your love. I do not ask for your loyalty, only your steel. When the dead come, they will not ask who you bent the knee to. They will not care what house you hail from. He looked at Bolton with eyes that had seen the abyss. They will come, and they will kill. And if we are not ready, every child in the north will rise with blue eyes and tear their mothers to pieces. No one spoke. The air itself felt heavy. The days that followed were a frenzy of preparation. Every forge in Winterfell roared day and night. Blades were reforged, arrows fletched, barrels filled with pitch and oil. Ned ordered the weirwood grove cleared to build pyres. If they fall, they burn, he told the men. No exceptions. Not even me. Robb came to him in the Godswood one night, where Ned stood alone, hands blackened from the forge. Do you remember when you used to hold Bran in your arms? Robb asked. Ned turned slowly. I remember, he was so small. And you were kind. I'm still your father. Robb's voice cracked. But you're not the same. No, Ned whispered. But I remember why I loved you. And I remember why I still do. There was a silence between them, filled only by the rustling of the red leaves. Then Robb nodded. When they come, we'll stand together. Ned reached out, and they clasped forearms not as king and lord, but as father and son. They saw the dead before they heard them, pale shapes emerging from the forest, silent, endless. The horns blew 3 times. Winterfell came alive with fire and steel. Ned stood on the battlements, looking down at the army of the dead. His face didn't change. He had seen death already. Now he would face it again. He raised his sword, and his voice rang out across the walls. No banners, no glory, just survival. Then the silence was shattered. The battle for the north began, and at its center stood the man who had already died once for honor. Now he would fight again for the living, and this time he would not fall so easily.